My name is Dr. Debbie Akerman. Just letting everybody know a little bit about myself. I am a licensed clinical social worker with a PhD in social welfare or social work. My clinical specialty is addiction, but I also deal with an incredible amount of trauma. I do a lot of couples counseling. When I'm not doing my practice, I'm full-time faculty at Yeshiva University in the School of Social Work, where I teach addiction, spirituality, clinical practice, and ethics. I am also a very proud mama of 11 children and 8 stepchildren and a bunch of grandchildren and 2 fur babies, who I think are my favorite children at this point because they give everything and demand nothing. And I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural episode of my podcast, The Pink Elephant. The reason I wanted to start this podcast is I kind of was thinking about it, and if you would have told me what my life was going to look like when I was 18, I'm not sure if I would have burst out crying or burst out laughing. You know, we all kind of plan what we think our life is going to be, and mine definitely did not go according to plan. And there have been some really interesting bumps and turns in the road. But 11 years ago, I faced one of the greatest challenges I think that anybody can face, where my third child, my oldest son, was diagnosed with brain cancer. And he fought a very valiant battle, short, valiant battle, and he died a year later. So this is the 10th year anniversary of my son Baruch's death. And I wanted to create something meaningful and something in his honor. And I came up with the idea of this podcast, the Pink Elephant Podcast. Pink elephant, obviously referring to the elephant in the room. Elephant is one of my favorite animals. They are incredibly intelligent, incredibly community, and really widely misunderstood. So I'd like to welcome my first guest to this episode, and I'd like to introduce you to Susan Rubin, who is a lawyer, a yoga instructor, and now has a sensory experience.
Somatic experience.
I'm starting the training in October. I should know what this is. Susan and I met about 10 years ago under extremely trying circumstances. I walked into the hospital one Friday afternoon with about 13 bags that I was schlepping along, and some of my children. It was very close to the Sabbath, and we were trying to organize, and I remember we had bags of newspapers and bags of food and bags of other food and bags of whatever, and room was divided, right, with a curtain. And from behind the curtain, this little face peeks out and says, you know, you can also put things over here. And I was like, okay, thank you very much. And we started talking. And Susan's son, Andrew, was Baruch's roommate more than once.
Yeah.
And as we started talking, we realized we had a lot in common in terms of we were both divorced and had pretty rough first marriages. And Susan was really like a constant source of support. I think one of the most incredible things is that we don't really keep in touch like every week or every day or every month. We're both really busy, lawyer, somatic experience, my work, your work. But when I wanted to do this, you were the obvious first choice for me. And I sent out an email thinking, this is ridiculous. You have not spoken to her in so long. How's this going to work out? And you immediately responded. Yeah. And that kind of showed me that when you bond over something like this,
right,
it just sticks, right? As much as I would love to talk to you every day and every week, I don't need to.
Right, we catch up right away.
Right away, there's this kind of thing that has drawn us both together. So my son died before yours,
yes.
A year before yours. And I remember when my son died and I spoke to you, and I really had this thought in my mind of, just let Andrew make it. Like, if Baruch couldn't, like, can we please just have Andrew make this? And I really couldn't follow the progress, although I will tell everybody, I remember you had this gigantic loose leaf folder with in plastic like sheet protectors, and I'm schlepping 14 bags, and you have an organized folder, and I was just like, oh my God, I cannot believe this, with every test result and every research study and every doctor's name and number and email. And
when you can't control anything, control what you can.
There you go. There you go. And I remember looking at that binder, I was like, I can barely keep my head above water. at this point. And before we started here, you mentioned to me, you said that that first day we came and we dumped everything, or was it a couple days later, you took a picture of Baruch sleeping and sent it to me and said, don't worry, he's doing okay. Even
That
though,
was a time when actually they were in separate rooms that week. They kept coming back at the same time every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks for treatments. And one time, so I went down the hall to just check on him, see if he needed any food. I was going to head down and pick up some food, and but he was sleeping. Yeah.
I start bawling and kill my makeup, this will be an excuse. Tell us a little bit about Andrew. I remember, I know he had finished college.
He was finished college. He had a great job, his dream job at a bank as an analyst. And one morning he called me and said that his eyes were bothering him. And I said, well, not many people work 70 hours a week, and go to my eye doctor. So he went to my eye doctor, and of course that's when they were able to see that there was a tumor and everything. I mean, I think it was like 4 days later we were already in surgery. So my life turned upside down in 1 minute. Yeah. I'm sure like yours.
So it's interesting. Baruch also had he had been sick for like a year and nobody knew what it was. They thought it was a hormone thing and a pituitary thing, and they'd give him medicine, and then he would get better, and then they'd wean off the medicine, and he was really, really ill. And I was like, okay, it's a hormone thing. I can do this. And I was making a bar mitzvah in August, my first since I got divorced, and he had no peripheral vision. And I'm like, okay. And I took him to the eye doctor. And I actually dropped him off. It was a broiling hot August day, and I was running around doing errands. I thought, okay, I'll go to the eye doctor. And they called me and said, get back here right now. Your son has brain cancer. You need to go to the hospital. I mean, talk about upside down.
Yeah.
I remember that day. I remember what I was wearing. I remember the heat. I remember sitting in the car with him and looking at him and thinking, I have to tell him he has brain cancer. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm a mother. I give out Band-Aids. I hug him. I love him. And they told us to go to Hackensack. So I started driving to Hackensack. And then they're like, the doctor called back and said, no, go to NYU. I got you an appointment at NYU. Flipped the car around. But what was it for you, those first couple of days, weeks?
Well, we had a lot of hope because we were, we just were on the wrong side of every odds. But the odds were that, with a certain amount of treatment that he would make it. And then, we find out that it's the rarer form of the two possibilities. And then he had germ cell. That's what I thought. Right. Yep. We both had the same.
The rarest, I think, like one of the doctors said, it was 150 people per year in America.
Oh, Andy's was 80.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
so yeah.
You're
but
worse.
So I called up every single hospital that had any cases at all, and the most cases ever seen was at NYU for 7 people of that type of cancer per year, and so. It was just our lives were upside down, but he was really so hopeful. He kept thinking that nothing, was going to stop him. So it kept us all sort of cheerleading, and it was hard because, I was never allowed to express my feelings because he wanted to be up and didn't want to see me upset. So he was protecting me, I was protecting him. It was a challenging time because nobody could really express what was going on for them.
Right. We happened to end up in the same practice, right? Dr. Allen was that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I still see him. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Because he's an advisor in the charity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So we were going to mention that Susan started as part of a foundation making.
It's a charity that was going on long before Andy got sick, but Andy received some of the services from there. And so Dr. Allen called me 2 weeks after Andy passed and said, you have way too much time on your hands, I'm sure, and you need to just get involved in something, which was true. I did actually appreciate that I had something to get involved in.
And this foundation works to raise funds for?
It would raises funds to hire excellent people to train for clinical trials or handle the children in the hospitals, and it's the fellowships. They supplement incomes of really good fellowships and doctors in the New York tri-state area, and also started a tumor board, like that, a national, so that we could share the information even of these rare types of cancer, brain cancer,
Right. So I think that's very interesting. There's a Jewish organization that it doesn't do the medical stuff, but it provides trips and respite and meals.
Mm-hmm.
And Baruch had a caseworker who also still calls me or contacts me every Jewish New Year. Baruch died a day before the Jewish New Year, and I always get a message from her, which is incredibly sweet. And she was once talking about their huge annual fundraiser. And I remember I said to her, I'm like, why do you have to fundraise so much? I mean, you help so many people. Like, what is this about? And she said to me, you don't understand. No matter what the outcome is, nobody wants anything to do with us. If the outcome is good, she's like, there's such trauma, they just don't ever want to think
Nobody
what
wants
happened.
to talk about it.
And if the
right.
outcome is bad, she said, there is such trauma that nobody wants to even go near us again. And so she told me a lot of their support actually comes from without that community that they serve.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting. I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it. I
Yeah.
think it's.
I guess that's why Dr. Allen pulled me in.
He didn't call me. I just want you to know. He definitely didn't call me and say you have too much time
thought
on
with
my
11
end.
children, you probably are busy anyway. Andy being my oldest, but my other two children were in college or out of college.
Right. My youngest was 5.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of kids at home.
Yeah.
Right. Honestly, like I think I said this at the first memorial. Who was his associate? Really good-looking guy with a K. I can't remember his.
Yes, I'm going to mispronounce his name, so I'm not even going to say it.
So I remember thinking in my like fantasy world, I'm like, all right, so this is going to be okay, and I'm just supposed to marry this guy. He's good looking, he's smart, he's taking care of us, like we're getting married. Like, I said that at the first memorial. He cracked up. And
Are
he
you
was
kidding?
like,
If Andy would have survived, I would have married Sharon Garrett.
You'd have done anything for anybody, right?
That was his favorite person, and he said to her one day, he said to her, if I make it through this and I have children, my first child's going to be named Sharon, and I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. Its name is Sharon. So
Incredible.
that was really sweet. They had a very special relationship, and she was wonderful.
I don't remember her exactly. I remember, I think, the face, and to be perfectly honest, I have blocked huge chunks of this out of my existence. Statistics tell you, I did take the class, that every 5 seconds a child dies, which clearly means there's a lot of us,
Right.
but we're kind of undercover.
And I find that I'm surprised when I hear somebody's, brother or sister passed when they were young, like my children, or they had lost a child at 1 or 2, so that there wasn't a child that my children would have known. But there's a lot of people that have gone through this, but nobody talks about it.
Nobody talks about it. And I have actually spoken about it publicly. And one of the things I like to always point out to people is in a dictionary that has over 800,000 words, there isn't one word for a parent who's lost a child.
Right.
We have a widow or a widower.
Right.
And we have a divorcee. Right. We have an orphan. But not one word in the dictionary for somebody who's lost a child.
Right.
And the closest word that we have is a Sanskrit word that means veloma.
Right.
And I know that you're very
right. So veloma in Sanskrit is sometimes a breathing technique, which is meaning going against the grain. So you're pausing your breaths in the middle of the inhalation and exhalation, or one way or the other. And the idea is that it is against the grain to lose your child, right? You lose your parents. Everybody's familiar with that experience, or not everybody, but people at some point will be. It's much more common, obviously, to lose a parent than it would be to lose a child. And so it's against the grain. It's against the order of nature.
Which is exactly what the word means, which is against the natural order.
Right, against the grain.
Right. And you told me what's the image?
The image they use, or it's called a niyaya, like the imagery is like petting your cat in the wrong direction of the fur.
It's perfect.
Right?
It's perfect.
Because it's not the
It's
way
not what you're supposed
it's not
to,
the way you do it.
Not supposed, You're supposed to do it.
Right.
Yeah, well, that I thought that was very interesting. And I just think it really highlights for people, we don't even recognize this. I mean,
Yeah.
There's so many, right? And we just kind of hide under the elephant and just kind of like muddle through and do what we need to do.
I find it interesting that so many people can't even mention it,
Right.
even on Andy's birthday, or like one of my sisters is uncomfortable with mentioning it, even on his birthday, like even on days when it's obvious, or he comes to mind, you know.
What was Andy's birthday?
June 5th.
What happened after? I remember talking to you about when Andy died, and I remember you telling me, and it was very peaceful. I know it was at your apartment.
Yeah.
And you were all...
We were all
I
there.
thought you were so brave. Every time I got off the phone with you, I'm like, I am not doing this very well.
Well, that's because you were looking
And I
at
don't-
my outside and not my inside.
And I never want to be tested again. But every time I got
Yes.
off the phone, it was like the folder, the organization, the this. Her son died at home, surrounded. I'm like, I really did not do this well. And don't ever make me do this again. But
Yeah.
So
right.
you...
I don't want to replay.
No, I definitely don't.
No, yeah, Andy was at home. He was, you know, his cousins had been there the night before and hanging out with him playing games because he was a gamer, a serious gamer. Like all of his friends played these very intricate games. So they came over all the time, constantly, whenever he wasn't in the hospital, even when he was in the hospital. But his friends came over to play games with him all the time. And yeah, it was really challenging, but I knew for several days there were no other treatments to even try. So for several weeks, I should say. Yeah, I don't know if he ever recognized it till 2 days before he passed that he was out of options.
And then he just
And
became
then he-
unconscious.
Yeah, well, he went to sleep, and yeah,
Didn't wake up.
yeah.
It's very peaceful.
Yeah, very peaceful. Yeah, I was lucky that he transitioned so easily in sleep.
Baruch died, though, the eve of the Jewish New Year,
Yeah.
which is very auspicious. You know, in the Jewish New Year, we believe, like, you know, who's going to
Andy
make
was on
it.
Tu B'Shvat.
On Tu
Right.
B'Shvat?
Uh-huh.
Really?
Yeah, he passed on the first part, and then he was buried on the second part, so. Yeah.
And Tu B'Shvat is called the Jewish New Year for the trees. That's when
Oh,
they-
really?
yeah.
No, I'm thinking of the day of mourning.
Oh, that's Tisha B'Av.
Tisha B'Av.
Oh,
I'm
that makes
mispronouncing.
okay. Okay, that makes a lot of
yes,
sense.
yes.
Yeah, that's the saddest day.
Yes.
That's when
well,
he passed
it was
away.
the saddest day, yes.
He passed away on Tisha B'Av.
Yes, and they said
Wow.
some numerology also about how he was one of the 36 because his numerology matched something to the rabbi from, I think it was from Fifth Avenue
Yeah.
Temple,
Well, like with his
Orthodox
name?
rabbi.
He-
Yeah, they did
yeah.
the name, they did
Yeah.
his Hebrew name, and they did all this. And Andy was like a math savant, like he was so crazy about math, and all of his friends were over when this rabbi was doing this whole thing and explaining,
How it comes
explaining
to-
this.
right.
And I got up. I don't think I got up once during the shiva when anybody was there, but I did get up to walk over to his friends and say, I know none of you understood that, but he did.
Right, because every Jewish letter has a numerical value.
Yes.
Then you can add them up, and then you can. I'm very into it.
Yes.
To me,
Oh,
it's like I love
well,
that kind of stuff.
I,
right.
I didn't understand it
Yeah.
completely, but I was happy to hear that the rabbi who came was an alternate to the rabbi who had been there for most of the nights. And he said when he saw Andy's name that he wanted to come. He asked the other rabbi to sub for him.
Really?
So
That's very cute.
I was like, oh, all right. He wanted to meet us. It was
That's very nice.
interesting. An interesting story about a woman that I saw, because it tells you about how, like, even though we're grieving, there are moments of joy in our lives, of course. But there was a woman who had lost her son that was on Andy's soccer team years before, and it was a very sudden thing. I didn't know her, and I really didn't know him, so I wasn't, like, in touch with her. But about 6 months after her son passed, I saw her in a furniture store shopping for furniture with her mother. And I saw that she had a few moments where she was smiling. I'm sure she went home and had a very difficult day because it was still
Right.
it was still so fresh. But I said, "Oh God, she's okay. Like she's having moments at
She's
least of something other than just grief." And on the third day of the Shiva, my apartment was always packed with kids and family, and she walked in a green dress, and she had come all the way from Westchester to drive into the city, and she came over to, came over to her, and I said, "Thank you for coming," and she said, "I don't think you know who I am." I said, "Oh, I know who you are. You're the person that saved me because I knew that there would be moments of joy in my life.
Wow.
And you didn't see me at the furniture store, but I saw you. And I saw you with your mom picking out fabrics, and I thought, if nothing else, there will be moments of joy or moments of doing things other than just grieving."
Right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That is.
Yeah. So
How long do you think that took? Because I will tell you, I will share, like, there's not a day that goes by in these 10 years, which is 3,650 days. I can do that math.
Yeah.
Right? That I don't think of Baruch. I mean,
no,
it could
I have
be-
a candle that I light every day for Andy. Somebody was kind enough to paint his portrait, and I have it surrounded with all special things for me. I'm still crying.
Well,
Sorry about that.
Why are you sorry?
Yeah.
You should be still crying. It's
Yeah.
okay. This is.
And so I created a little ritual that sort of allows me a moment so that it doesn't become as unpredictable for the rest of the day. You know,
Wow.
it sets me up for, just
And
contact.
every morning you light the candle and you.
Every morning I light a candle. I think it's really helpful. Somebody recommended it to me who had lost their son, and to just create a ritual around it.
Do you change it up?
Yeah, sometimes I put different stones in front of it. Sometimes I love bees. I also love elephants, which is really sweet about this,
thank you.
because elephants are my main thing about
Why do you
on
like them?
Instagram.
Right, why?
Well, because they are very communal and they're super smart and
Super and maternal.
yes, and they mourn.
That's right.
They're
That's
you know
right.
they have a long sometimes mourning period where other animals may or may not mourn, but they usually don't mourn as long as elephants.
Right.
Elephants, which is probably why they say, "Oh, have a memory
Memory
like an elephant,"
yeah.
right?
And the mamas are strong creatures in the elephant breed.
Yeah, right.
They lead, but they protect their young like
Yes,
fiercely.
yes,
Oh, I'm glad. See, there you
yeah.
go.
So there you go.
So she suggested that you do that, and so now
So she
you.
recommended that as a way to be, because I said, I have times where I have a wave, a few weeks at a time of heavier grief, and I'm more unpredictable, and about I'm trying to teach, I'm trying to see clients, I'm trying to have a semblance of a life, but I'm not going to forget Andy, obviously.
Ever.
So this way I have the morning ritual with him, and
Let me encourage you in one way. I'm Orthodox Jewish, and
Yeah.
we know that we believe in the concept of the Garden of Eden or hell. And what I was told is that any parent who's lost a child goes straight to the Garden of Eden, like you've gotten your hell on earth. So you're.
yeah, I remember some
we're
days wanting
good.
to go immediately.
I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
I fell apart the first year Baruch died. I was newly married. My husband and I, they told me he was okay. Dr. Allen and Dr. Handsome K guy. I can't remember. I see his face.
Carianis.
Oh, thank you.
Carianis.
There, yeah, Dr. Carianis. Thank you very kindly. Appreciate that. And I was like, yay. And I was dating my husband. And then I remember I was at work one day and the phone rang and like he relapsed. And I knew just then. I was just like, that's it.
That's what Andy
That's
had
it.
too, was a
And
relapse.
so I called my husband. I called Moshe. I said, we got married like a week later, 10 days later,
Yeah.
because I wanted Baruch there. And the truth is he went into the hospital afterwards and he never came out. But I fell apart. I was in this new marriage. My husband has 8 children. I have 11. Things were hectic enough, let's just say, kind of get everybody
Yeah.
to meld together. And I just sunk into the best depression in the world. And, I'm a therapist. And now I always say to my clients, do not knock a good depression. It is so protective. Literally, I slept 18 to 20 hours a day. And Susan, I didn't want to do anything about it. It was amazing. It was just fall into that bed and you're out.
Yeah.
And I pretended to have a job, a friend of mine was very kind and gave me probably the most low-level job. I mean, I already had a master's. I was in a doctoral program, and she gave me a job that like an intern could do, but I didn't care. I had to, got up and did something. And it was in Brooklyn, and my husband was working in Brooklyn, so I would drive him in the morning, go to the office, stay for like 2-3 hours, and I'll never forget this. And then it was wintertime. I had this really huge, big, like, flumpy coat, and I would park on a side street, wrap the coat around me, the sun, the nice one, fall asleep in the car, right? Like, hopefully like a well-dressed homeless woman.
Yes.
And wake up like 2.5, 3 hours later and be like, oh, I have to go get Moshe. And I'd pick him up. He's like, do you want to get food? I wanted to go to that same stupid burrito place that is like near where he worked. Total junk, total crap. You didn't have to chew. It just slid down your throat. And like I ordered these 2 burritos, went home, and I'm like, well, that was a good day, and went straight back to bed.
Yeah.
I mean, it just...
I forced myself to do studying for 3 hours a day. So I took a course.
See how I'm failing?
No. I just had to get out of bed.
I had burritos.
But then I
understand.
I went to sleep the rest of the day. I didn't have high expectations of for the first few months. I have to say that the second year was harder for me than the first year.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that, and I was warned about it from a friend, and she said, this year seems bad, but there's still people talking about him.
Correct.
There's still people remembering him.
Correct.
Next year, you're on your own.
Right. And calling you to go to lunch and being supportive, right? And then people move on.
Yeah.
And it's just, Yeah. I have a colleague and a friend when I was working at that agency, and he was the only person I told, and he happens to be a grief expert.
Oh,
and
that's great.
Yeah, and I knew instinctively I could say something to him. Why didn't I say anything to anybody else? I don't know what, was embarrassed. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, I didn't do anything wrong, but I wanted to protect my stupid little job and, have this professional demeanor. Like, I can work when my son's dying of brain cancer. Why not? I mean, ridiculous.
Right.
But I remember I said something to him, and he is really high up in the agency. And I'll never forget, he opened his drawer, he took out his keys, and he handed them to me to the office. He said, these are yours. You come in here anytime you want. I had a cubby. He had an office. Anytime you want, I'm in and out. You lay down, you do whatever you need to do. This is your space. Yeah, he was incredible. But I'm in mental health, right? And I know there's that thing called, shared experience. So when I have clients now who are either grieving or depressed, I remember this one client, I talked to her father, and I said, look, the idea of taking a shower is overwhelming. Like, that's where we're at. Because I remember laying in my bed and knowing I needed to take a shower. I was like, I need to take a shower. And the thought of doing it, I mean, you may as well have asked me to like climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I couldn't. I knew I needed it. And then I did it. I was exhausted. I'm like, back to bed. And it reminding me, and 6 weeks after Barak died, I went to a seminar on trauma. Again, I'm living a normal life, right? I went back to the PhD program. We didn't have any Shiva because he died the eve of the Jewish New Year, so there was 1 half day of Shiva.
Oh.
I was grateful at that point. I was just like, I don't want to just get me out of this whole sphere. So I went back to school the week after, and I I walked in and I told the teacher, I'm like, hi. She's like, how's everything? I'm like, my son died last week. And I'll never forget the look of horror on her face. She's like, what are you doing here? I said, oh, I'm in school. Like, we have class, right? And she just looked at me. She's like, do you want to go home? I'm like, no, I'm going to stay here. So I went to a training, and the guy was incredible. I can't remember his name, but it was on PTSD and all the things that trigger the PTSD response. Right. So I went over to him afterwards, and of course, like, now I felt the need to tell everybody my son passed. Like, I wanted whatever validation and support I could get from everybody. I kind of went over to him like, hi, I'm divorced and remarried and blah, blah, and my son died like 3 weeks ago. He put his papers down, he took my hands, and he said, this will make your divorce look like an effing walk in the park. He's like, there is nothing like what you are going through.
Right.
And I started crying, and I was like, thank you. So when do you think you started to
7 years.
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah.
One of my teachers said, if you ever have a trauma, 7 years later, all of your cells are renewed, or something.
Oh,
it's kind of a cool thought.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't really understand all of it, but I thought about it. About 7 years is when I could start to think about the happy memories rather than the traumatic memories.
Right.
That's how I always described it.
That you
Was
lost,
I was like an amputee, like I had phantom pain. You know, I felt like an amputee. That it was just, you know, I kept noticing it. But you learn to live without that arm or that leg. You learn to live without that part of your life. Yeah.
And this colleague of mine who gave me the keys to his office, he is a grief expert. That's what he does. He's head of like bereavement, and he goes to all the horrible. And I remember him telling me, do not think of recovering before 5 or 6 years. He said,
Yeah.
don't even put the word recover in your vocabulary till 5 or 6 years have passed. And I was so grateful for that, because, and then at year 5, I thought, well, he's not right, because I still feel
Yeah, right.
ridiculously horrible.
Yes.
But I think that I just get to acceptance. Like,
Right.
it's
Well,
there.
So
And-
I had an interesting person talk to me about this, and they said, you never get over it. So imagine, you know, putting a ball of dirt in water, and you can't pull it out. It's there always. But you can pour so much more water in that it comes to the top and goes out, right? So some of the pain all of it doesn't ever go out. But you make your life bigger. You do more for others. You teach. You create a life that's worth living, and you then are able to have that as part of your day,
Right.
but not all of
The whole
your
thing.
day anymore.
Yeah. Who said that? That's very
I don't
wise.
even remember. I saw it on a like screen somewhere when I was
But it's so
looking
true.
up grief,
Yeah.
because I have clients that have trauma and grief as well, and I work on the physical part of it, not the emotional part, right? So I'm literally trying to reset the nervous system so that the chemistry in their body will allow them to recover with a therapist that will be able to
That's really cool.
give them some, guidance, right?
We can work together. I'm a
yeah.
terrible administrator. I won't have that folder, but I'm very good with people. So I'm good there. Just don't ask me for the paperwork.
Yeah.
You'll do that.
So like EMDR, where it tries to work on the nervous system through the visual,
Right.
this is through the other parts of, all of the body, using a full, kidneys, spectrum,
Wow.
like all of the organs, and the breathing techniques and meditation, and the vagus nerve,
Yeah,
which
the
is
vagal. Yeah. Did you get into this because of your experience with Andy?
No, I had been doing therapeutic yoga before Andy got sick.
After law.
After law.
Which is like from here to real estate. Wait, you went into real estate, right? You were doing apartments.
I always play with real estate.
Right, no, but you were working for an agency. You were selling
Yes.
Right, I remember that.
Because going back immediately to healing, it was too hard. So that took me years to get back to what I was doing before Andy got sick. During the years Andy was sick, I didn't have clients, obviously. And then, I was lucky that he had his own health insurance. I didn't have other children in the house, so I could devote all of my time. So I did. And I'm grateful, because I look back on it in that way, like the type of cancer our children had usually shows up at 10 years old.
Really?
And when the children were 10, there was no treatments at all. So at least I had 3.5 to almost 4 years of time with him. Plus I had the extra 10 years because he was 24 when he got sick. So I had a lot more time with him than would have normally been the case when you have a germ cell tumor. So usually between like 9 and 12 that the children's symptoms show. But our children's symptoms didn't show. Yours at 20, I guess?
Baruch was 21.
Right, so he had shown some symptoms at 20, right?
But like
and,
20, yeah.
Yeah, and Andy didn't show any symptoms until 24, and he passed at 28.
So after Baruch died, I boycotted the new year. I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I'm doing it under severe protest.
Yes,
right. I can show up, but I'm not in there. And then the first couple of years I went to synagogue, and I was just bawling my eyes out. And I was just like, I can't do this. I'm too uncomfortable. This is just, I don't want to be a spectacle. Like, I'm not interested. But this year, very interestingly, 10 years, I was invited to a retreat. I did some work for them. and it was a combination of a recovery retreat with another organization. They partner, and they have this really beautiful New Year retreat that, we go to. I do a lot of recovery work, like 12-step recovery work, because
Right.
of the addiction. And so there were a lot of meditation meetings and a lot of, gratitude, and it's just the whole spirit of recovery, which I love. It's just very healing to me. And at the end, they had a gratitude meeting. And the guy who runs it, he called me up, and I really felt this. I said, I feel like I've gotten the Jewish New Year back. It was the
Yeah.
first time in 10 years that I went to services. I liked it. I sat with people. My husband came. A couple of my stepchildren were there. I enjoyed the meals. I actually was like, I can do this holiday.
Right.
It, like, 10 years, I've just been like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't do this.
It's funny because initially, after Andy passed, I was at synagogue every week, and I was doing the prayers, 3 times a day, and I was religious about it. But as soon as the year was over, I don't think I've been back to New Year's service still.
It's too hard.
It's 8 years. Maybe in 2 more years. You never know.
I don't know. If I don't get invited back to the retreat, I don't know if I'm going back to the synagogue.
I don't think so.
No, only if I go back to this retreat. And I told them that. I'm like, if I come back next year to this retreat and every other year, yes. If not, I'm staying home and I'm not going to
One
services.
thing I'm curious about is whether or not you joined any grieving groups that were helpful. Because I tried, but was not successful at all. I mean, I found a lot of solace in other mothers who
Right.
were in my circumstance to
Right.
talk to them one-on-one. But whenever I tried to go to, or it was suggested to me to go to a bereavement group,
Right.
I found it just enormously unhelpful and painful.
So this is very interesting. We really are alike. Do I look like you? Okay, like, can you tell me I look like you, even like a little bit? Wait, let's see pinky. So I look like your pinky. Good enough. Right after Brocktown, like that fall, the hospital offered like some bereavement groups. So I went
Yeah.
to one. Very, very, very wonderful people there. And I'm listening to them. And I remember this one man got up. He had one child who passed away Christmas Eve. I'm like, I'm out. I'm like, I can't listen to someone else's. I'm like, one day of your year is like that most Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. I just walked out bawling. I'm like, I can't. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
People were wonderful there, and then there's a Jewish organization that I also joined up with for a while, and my way of coping with this is to make meaning. So I joined the organization. I'm like, I'll speak. Let me talk to the women. And it went well. But that's why I started a podcast, so I
Yeah.
can talk. But not everybody wants to hear me all the time. And I didn't find it particularly helpful. I feel like this is like one of the most personal processes you go through. There's
Right.
no right way to do this. That you just can't tell somebody, well, you do it this way, and this is the way you need to do this.
No, but you can try so many different, like I tried the bereavement groups, I tried the ritual, which is working for
Right.
me. Dr. Allen said you'll feel better if you do something. So, I'm on the board of a charity that helps children in Andy's circumstance and Baruch's circumstance.
Do you feel better with that?
I do.
Yeah.
I feel better with that, and we've raised probably about $750,000 in his name, which was
Wow.
lovely over the 8 years. And so it feels good. I'm going to continue until $1 million, then I'm done.
you're not
Because
done.
it's very stressful
No, I don't see
to
you being
do
done.
that. Well, I'm going to be done with that charity, at least I think, because it's very stressful every year to bring it all up and to have the event. And it's, I worry that nobody will remember
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
much as we do.
Yeah.
And yet all the kids come back, and it's great to see them, and they all see each other, so it's lovely. We did, I think, 5 years of spin
Spin
spinathons.
class?
Yeah.
Oh, really? On a
Yeah,
spin-
yeah.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
they would play his, all his Michigan friends would come, all of his, friends from high school would come. And so it was really nice reunion for the kids and a great way to sort of honor him. And then COVID happened, so we got shut down. So we did like a virtual. Everybody go out and do your own running or biking, and
Right.
send pictures on a particular Instagram. And that actually raised money as well, which was nice. And then last year we did a karaoke event,
I'll
which
come
was
to
fun.
that.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
like- I also bike, and I
Yes.
do spin. So far,
Yeah, so
in,
we're
I'm good,
still
yeah.
doing it, and I'll probably stay on the board, but I find doing the events hard on my children. I have Adam and Kendall, who, their lives are very busy, and this makes them sad and challenged, and so I told them that maybe 2 or 3 more, and we're honored, and we can move on and do something else in his honor.
That's very Viktor Frankl,
Yeah.
right? That you take suffering and you try to create some meaning.
Yeah.
So this is part of my meaning, and Baruch had a really, really hard time in school. He really was
He was
not.
very into art and music, right?
He was a
Music.
drummer and musical.
Yeah,
and very,
I
right.
remember his music.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I remember him playing on his computer music from a friend of his, and me hearing hearing music, and
He composed a couple of songs.
yes, and I
Could have been
remember
a-
him
yeah.
showing that to me,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And of course, I would say to him, can I get you anything? And of course, he couldn't, because he was kosher and he wasn't going to break that to eat the food from the cafeteria. But we
Right.
were at least able to bring him a drink or two. And but I remember, him, and maybe it was with your other son, showing pictures of his trip to Israel as well.
Yeah. He spent a year in Israel learning.
Yeah.
Doing a good thing. But with the getting together, so we also have once a year there's a certain part of the Torah that people learn in honor of somebody's passing. And it takes a lot of people, because it's called the Mishnah. I don't know how to describe it in English, but there's a lot of chapters and a lot of ones to learn. So he has this best friend, Shua, who for 10 years, August comes and he calls me or he texts me and he sets up a whole spreadsheet, and then we gather on the eve of his,
Right.
we have
And these rituals help,
yeah,
right?
and we have a meal. But this is the interesting thing. Like, Shua has never not called, like clockwork. The days start to shorten, and I know I'm going to hear from Shua. And it's also the same people that he
Right.
knew when he was, in the high school, the post-high school.
Yeah.
And COVID, we did it online. Shua called me. I'm like, no. And so everybody was on their boxes, and we
Yeah.
did it. And you need this so badly. And this year we just did it. It was just now, right?
Yeah.
And my youngest, who's now 17, should live and be well. He resembles Baruch, and so we went to the event. Now we do it where all his friends live, which is Long Island. 'Cause I'm not
Yeah.
going to make them drag out. They have babies. It's the night before the holiday.
Yeah.
So we go there. And I talked to his friend afterwards. He's like, I almost burst out crying. I'm like, what happened? He's like, your son looks so much like
Oh.
Baruch. He's like, I literally, I just started to cry. He's like, I cannot believe it. And it connects you.
Right.
And but
I
it's also,
still see a couple of Andy's friends. I have dinner probably every couple months with one of his closest friends. And I keep in touch with some of his friends who now have babies.
I was
And,
going to say.
yeah,
Right,
it's,
right. And
it's, that's a challenge sometimes, I have to be honest.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love them. They should have wonderful lives, but seeing the
It
potential.
hurts. Yeah, it
Yeah.
hurts. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The reason we do it there is all his friends now are married, and they have children, and they have beautiful careers. And the guy whose house it was at, who was truly his best friend, and I walked in now, and he's beautiful house and a beautiful family, and of course he deserves everything, right?
Right.
But it hurts. But then he said to me, oh, look, I just planted shrubs, and we put in these new walk-in closets. And I looked at him like, I have pictures of you and Baruch in your year in Israel. Pretty compromised. I said, and now you're talking to me about your walk-in closets and your shrubs. I'm like, really? Is this where we are?
Right.
And he just started laughing, and his wife's like, where are those pictures? I'm like, I have them.
I have them,
But,
right.
And now he's turned into this 32, 33-year-old
Yeah.
man with a family, and he's upwardly mobile, and it's painful. I remember when I went to his wedding, I just spent the whole evening sobbing, and then
Yeah.
I walked out. I felt
Well,
I'm not
I
doing him
know.
a service.
I couldn't make it through a few weddings. Some I did, some I didn't. But it was sweet that they always invited me.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that's part of the challenge in that. And honestly, I don't miss Andy as much on the tough days of my life as I do on the really holidays. Like I miss him most when I would have shared time with him. You know, Mother's Day, of course, that makes sense. But, you know, on the holidays, they've
Family
never
time.
felt the same.
Family time.
Yeah.
Are any of your children married?
One of my children, my son, Adam, my second child, is married and a lovely wife. And my daughter's getting married in June.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow. So I have 2 grandsons, and the first one is named after Baruch.
Nice.
Yeah, my daughter, Liba, who was right above him, and they were tight, and so she had this baby boy, and I remember at the bris, right, the circumcision ceremony on the 8th day where they give the baby the name. As soon as they announced the name, she looked at me, she's like, "Do you hear, Mama? Named after Baruch, right? That's good. That's good." And I was just bawling, and she was crying. She's like, "Look."
I'm hopeful that my son and daughter-in-law will have a baby and they will name it after Andy. That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, makes the phantom pain maybe just, you know.
Yeah.
What
it
would
comes
you,
in waves, I think, you know.
I don't know, I always find it like, yeah, it definitely comes in waves, but then I'll just be driving randomly down the street and like, boom, like Baruch's image appears, and or like, for sure, I think about him the first thing every morning and last thing before we go to sleep, like that's for sure. But for me, it's music. I'm also very, very, very much into music, and so is Baruch, and so if I'll hear a particular song on the radio, and I'll just like immediately flash to him. And but what would you say to people, you know, hopefully who are listening to this, like how to approach what should, you know, like you said, like people don't even want to talk about this, and that makes you feel so, I don't know, odd and
different. I remember once somebody said to me, I said, you know, you can say his name. It's not like I'm not thinking about him. And she said something that I thought was very harsh, but she said, it's not like anybody who sees you doesn't first see somebody who lost their child. And I thought, wow, that's the first thing they see of me is poor me, like, you know, pitying me. And I think it's so hard for people because it's such a horrible thing. They don't want to get near it for themselves,
right,
you know.
Catching, right.
But I think, you know, I'm always pleased when somebody says to me something about Andy, or I remembered Andy, or, you know, so.
I think that, to me, and if I may, I think that would be kind of like the takeaway of this.
Yeah.
Is like, instead of looking at you and being like, oh, there's Susan who lost a son, to call you to say, we remember Andy, and he came up in our conversation at dinner or at Thanksgiving, or when we were talking about U of M, another connection we have because I'm from Detroit. I remember that, the U of M thing.
Yeah.
And to like, and I remember I at one of my speeches I said, the only thing worse than losing a child probably is that people don't remember that child. I said, so anybody who comes out to anything that I've ever spoken, I'm so grateful. Like, you remember my son.
Yes.
And that to me is a takeaway. When people text me around the time of year, or we're thinking of him, and he's still alive somewhere. Like,
I mean, because I know that people are thinking about him at times, but they don't reach out. I think because they're afraid if I'm having a good day, they'll upset me.
Right.
You know, I think the benefit of it's much more than the chance of upsetting.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And
yeah.
I often thought it was like, people think it's like Ebola or something, like it's very contagious. So just like, stay away. This is not for me. Like, get away from me. And
don't worry, it's not. You're not going to catch it.
Exactly. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to wish it on you.
I think other cultures do it very differently. You know, different cultures, and even in you know, Orthodox as opposed to I'm not. And I think that there's different rituals that people do, and you know, it's just sort of the undercurrent of not talking about it is more challenging, makes it more challenging.
For us.
Nothing's worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Nothing's worse than the actual loss to me. But
Right.
You know, it feels good to know that I'm not the only one who remembers him.
That's right. So I wanted to, again, have you please mention the foundation head.
Oh, so this is Making Headway Foundation. It is an organization that pays for scholarships for children after their treatment.
Making Headway
Foundation.
Okay.
And it also has events for children that are going through treatment, as well as paying the salaries of support staff that increase the ability for children to have better
The best
care, better treatments,
Services, okay.
and other services.
It's amazing. And,
Yeah, and also they have a staff of therapists
Yeah.
that are paid for by the foundation. So that's nice as well, that, you know, that they have that support.
Support for them.
Not all the hospitals have that much support.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so this is nice to be able
So,
to,
please let
it's
me
all
know.
of the New York's tri-state area that they try to support in all of their different services. But this is, it's, the uniqueness of this particular charity is that most charities that are involved in cancer, pediatric cancer, are either all research
Right.
or all services.
I see.
And this is the
Combines.
combination, and this is a combination. We handle grants for staff, and we also handle, you know, scholarships. We also do things like funeral services and transportation
The
for
whole
those who
thing.
can't get there. And
So
yeah.
first of all, I want to thank you. This has been beyond incredible. I am so
It's
grateful.
so nice to reconnect in
it's,
person.
It's really been phenomenal, like transformative. And, you know, as a therapist, I'm supposed to respect what you say. And, you know, if this is what you want, like, no problem. But please don't quit this organization. They need you.
Oh, well,
I mean,
no,
they
I'll
just-
stay with the organization, but I won't be doing the annual
Annual thing.
bike-a-thons, because
Okay.
just the technology of it
Too much.
puts too much
Yeah.
pressure on my children.
So then I definitely
Yeah.
want to join one of the events before you.
Yeah, just join the events.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Susan.
You're
An
welcome.
Unbelievable, really an unbelievable honor. Only good for you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much.